Hey everyone, welcome back to another cozy chat on the Patronus pages. Today we're diving into a curious question. Why didn't Lord Voldemort attack the Longbottom family after that game-changing prophecy, which drastically reshaped Harry Potter's life? So here's a bit of backstory many of you might remember. Just before Harry was born on July 31st, 1980, a not-so-spot-on seer named Sybil Trelawney threw a major curveball into the wizarding world with a chilling prophecy. This all went down in a rather informal setting at the Hog's Head, where she was chatting with Professor Albus Dumbledore about a job at Hogwarts. Mid-conversation, she slips into a trance and drops this bombshell. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the seventh month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal. But he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives. From her later gig as the divination professor, we gather she probably made this spooky prediction in June 1980, just before Harry popped into the world. Voldemort's beef with the Potter family seems pretty straightforward. Harry arrived right at the end of July. Plus, his parents, Lily and James, weren't just any wizards. They'd turned down invites to join the Death Eaters and were knee-deep in Order of the Phoenix missions against Voldemort. But here's the real question. Why did Voldemort skip the Longbottoms? Alice and Frank Longbottom were in the same boat. Asked to join the Death Eaters, said a hard no, and fought alongside the Order. And their son, Neville, born July 30th, 1980, a day before Harry. He could have easily been the one the prophecy spoke of. Imagine if it had been Neville with the scar and the prophecy's weight on his shoulders. Although it always seemed like Harry was the one in the spotlight, if Voldemort was really out to squash any threat, wouldn't he go after both boys? Maybe he planned to target Neville next, but we all know his first attempt with Harry didn't exactly go as planned. Or, think about this, maybe Voldemort saw a bit of himself in Harry. They were both half-bloods, unlike Neville, who's a pureblood. Dumbledore once said Voldemort didn't choose the pureblood wizard, but the half-blood like himself. Before even meeting Harry, Voldemort inadvertently gave him powers and a destiny that allowed Harry to dodge his clutches time and again. And then there's a wild card, Professor Albus Dumbledore. Even though Snape's intel was all about Voldemort gunning for the Potters, Dumbledore knew about the prophecy, and that Neville fit the bill too. Yet it seems he didn't make moves to hide the Longbottoms, who faced a grim fate at the hands of Death Eaters post-Voldemort's downfall. Did Dumbledore somehow know who the prophecy was intended for? Did him helping the Potters tip off Voldemort on who the real threat was? In the grand scheme, Neville and Harry each brought something different to the table. Neville was steeped in a family of wizards, while Harry was an orphan with no magical kin, potentially making him an easier protégé for Dumbledore in the fight against Voldemort. As an orphan with no living magical relatives, Harry was somewhat isolated, with fewer familial ties to influence or protect him. This lack of a magical family network made him more malleable and perhaps more reliant on figures of authority within Hogwarts, like Dumbledore. Dumbledore, recognizing this vulnerability, could have seen an opportunity to mentor Harry closely, guiding his development both magically and morally. This guidance was crucial for preparing Harry to eventually face and possibly sacrifice himself in the fight against Voldemort, a path that Dumbledore foresaw as necessary for the greater good of the wizarding world. Moreover, Harry's upbringing away from the wizarding community under the neglectful care of the Dursleys likely made him more hungry for acceptance and belonging within the magical realm. This desire for belonging could make him more open to Dumbledore's influence and teachings. In contrast, Neville Longbottom, despite the tragedy inflicted upon his parents, was raised by his grandmother in an environment where he was constantly reminded of his family's bravery and his heritage. Neville's upbringing, surrounded by his own kind and steeped in the wizarding culture, might have offered him a different kind of resilience and independence that wouldn't necessarily align as seamlessly with Dumbledore's specific plans for Harry. Dumbledore's choice, then, might have been tactically motivated by who he thought could be more deeply shaped to confront and potentially end Voldemort's reign of terror. J.K. Rowling actually had a lot to say on the topic on her official website. She ran a poll for some of the top questions fans wanted her to answer. The actual question itself was, what is the significance of Neville being the other boy to whom the prophecy might have referred? Here was her response: "Finally, I am answering the poll question. I am sorry it has taken so long, but let me start by saying how glad I am that this was the question that received the most votes, because this was the one that I most wanted to answer. Some of you might not like what I'm going to say, but I'll address that issue at the end of my response." To recap, Neville was born on the 30th of July, the day before Harry, so he too was born as the 7th month dies. His parents, who were both famous Aurors, had thrice defied Voldemort, just as Lily and James had. Voldemort was therefore presented with the choice of two baby boys to whom the prophecy might apply. However, he did not entirely realize what the implications of attacking them might be, because he had not heard the entire prophecy. As Dumbledore says, he, the eavesdropper, only heard the beginning, the part foretelling the birth of a boy in July to parents who had thrice defied Voldemort. Consequently, he could not warn his master that to attack you would be to risk transferring power to you. In effect, the prophecy gave Voldemort the choice of two candidates for his possible nemesis. In choosing which boy to murder, he was also, without realizing it, choosing which boy to anoint as the chosen one, to give him tools no other wizard possessed, the scar and the ability it conferred, a magical window into Voldemort's mind. So what would have happened if Voldemort had decided that the pureblood, not the half-blood, was the bigger threat? What would have happened if he had attacked Neville instead? Harry wonders this during the course of Half-Blood Prince and concludes rightly that the answer hinges on whether or not one of Neville's parents would have been able or prepared to die for their son in the way that Lily died for Harry. If they hadn't, Neville would have been killed outright. Had Frank or Alice thrown themselves in front of Neville, however, the killing curse would have rebounded just as it did in Harry's case, and Neville would have been the one who survived with the lightning scar. What would this have meant? Would a Neville bearing the lightning scar have been as successful at evading Voldemort as Harry has been? Would Neville have had the qualities that have enabled Harry to remain strong and sane throughout all of his many ordeals? Although Dumbledore does not say as much, he does not believe so. He believes Voldemort did indeed choose the boy most likely to be able to topple him, for Harry's survival has not depended wholly or even mainly upon his scar. So where does this leave Neville, the boy who was so nearly king? Well, it does not give him either hidden powers or a mysterious destiny. He remains a normal wizarding boy, albeit one with a past in its way as tragic as Harry's. As you saw in Order of the Phoenix, however, Neville is not without his own latent strengths. It remains to be seen how he will feel if he ever finds out how close he came to being the chosen one. Some of you, who have been convinced that the prophecy marked Neville in some mystical fashion for a fate intertwined with Harry's, may find this answer rather dull. Yet I was making what I felt was a significant point about Harry and Voldemort, and about prophecies themselves, in showing Neville as the also-ran. If neither boy was preordained before Voldemort's attack to become his possible vanquisher, then the prophecy, like the one the witches make to Macbeth, if anyone has read the play of the same name, becomes the catalyst for a situation that would never have occurred if it had not been made. Harry is propelled into a terrifying position he might never have sought, while Neville remains the tantalizing might have been. Destiny is a name often given in retrospect to choices that had dramatic consequences. Of course, none of this should be taken to mean that Neville does not have a significant part to play in the last two novels, or the fight against Voldemort. As for the prophecy itself, it remains ambiguous, not only to readers but to my characters. Prophecies, think of Nostradamus, are usually open to many different interpretations. That is both their strength and their weakness. Well, that's all we got for this week's episode. Thanks for tuning in. What do you think? Would Voldemort have gone after Neville if things hadn't gone awry? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you liked our little discussion, hit that like button, subscribe. Until we meet again, just remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.